1945, the British were celebrating. They'd been at war with Germany for 5 long years, and now Hitler was dead and the war won. People celebrated. They danced in the street, they hung out flags, children enjoyed themselves in street parties. Tuesday, the 8th of May 1945, was set aside for a huge party. The nation was at peace in Europe. But people did more than just celebrate. They wanted things to change, to get better, and certainly better than they'd been in the years before the war. The Labour Party won the general election in 1945 with a massive majority. People voted for change. Nowhere was change needed more than in the homes that people lived in. Most of Britain's big cities had suffered from bombing during the war, and lots of homes had been either destroyed or badly damaged. And that wasn't all. In the 1930s, a lot of people had lived in very poor houses. Houses without bathrooms, inside loos, decent gardens. People lived in houses where children had to share bedrooms with their parents. Hardly anyone had the sort of thing we take for granted today: television set, a car, a video, a phone or a washing machine. Houses in Glasgow, the big industrial city in Scotland, were typical. Tom Marchant filmed them with his home movie camera.
Now that you've seen on the screen there, that was typical Glasgow tenement housing. Now a tenement, in case you don't know, is a 3-4 storey building, and you enter off a common entrance, which we call in Glasgow a close. 2-3 flats opening off each landing. The kitchens would be very poorly finished. They would have what was called a range. A range would be a cast iron kind of open fire with cooking facilities on it. Or you'd probably be lucky if you had a bathroom in these houses. Typical Glasgow tenement just had a stairhead toilet, and that was on the landing, so that you had to share a WC pan without a wash hand basin with all your neighbours.
This is your hometown. This is your hometown. This is your hometown. This is your hometown.
Betty Beattie grew up in one of these tenements. She remembers it vividly.
It was a very happy place. Everyone looked out for everyone else. You could play in the streets the way children can't play nowadays, but we were able to play in the streets. There's bad points about it too, I suppose, quite a lot of bad points. But on the whole, it was very happy. The area tended to be families, you know, your aunts and your uncles and your cousins, married cousins, all lived within doors and perhaps a few streets of one another. The house consisted of a lobby, a kitchen and a room, and each room had a bed recess, which a double bed fitted into. And curtains were over the front of it, which you opened at night to get the air into it, and during the day the curtains were closed to conceal the bed. My parents had their name on the housing list to get a bigger house. The house seemed like a palace. I had my own bedroom, my brother had his own bedroom, parents had the large room, kitchen which was fitted with cooker and all sorts of things we didn't have before, and a lovely large living room.
government promised a huge house building programme. It wanted to build as many decent homes as possible. These were council houses, built by local councils and rented to people who needed somewhere to live. You had to put your name down on the waiting list for a council house. This is what Dick and Kathleen Phillips did. Letchworth Council in Hertfordshire was so proud of its house building programme it made a film about it, and the Phillips were in it.
We notified the council that we were back in Letchworth and we needed a house. So then they sorted all through the lists and put us to the top, and we got this one.
They moved in 1952, and they still live there today.
They called us up and told us that this was the house we'd allocated you, and we said, oh, that's fair enough. We were great for anything, I suppose. Really.
We're really excited because we've never had a house before. It was always in married quarters, you know, and we just had to have what the army gave us.
David Piggott's family moved into their council house in Chingford in North London in 1948. At the time I was a 2-year-old, living just down the road in South Woodford.
It was wonderful to have a home of our own, albeit we were renting it, as so many people did in those days. Although it was the front garden, it was also a little bit of a sports ground, because my young brother, who was keen on cricket, used to play cricket here with his friends or his uncle. And I remember filming my mother and my aunt playing tennis over there, just hitting the ball to one another and then losing it in the bush.
In the 1950s, more and more houses were built, and not all by local councils. Some families saved up money and moved out of terraced houses in towns and cities into semi-detached homes in the new suburbs. I'm going to show you a bit of film of Bruce State and his family. They could afford to buy a house in a suburb of Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, and Bruce was a keen amateur filmmaker. This is his daughter Judy. She was born in 1958.
I think my parents chose this particular house because it was an ideal family home, and that was what they were looking for, because they, as newlyweds, they were intending to have a reasonably large family. Until I left here, this was the only house that I'd ever known as a family house. The size of the garden appealed to them, and the fact that it was a 3-bedroom house, and presumably it was in their price bracket. I think that they paid in the region of £2,000.
As families grew and people became richer, some moved house, but the States didn't. What they did was extend their home. It was a sort of early do-it-yourself job.
My father actually built a garage onto the property because there was just enough room between his and the bungalow next door to put a garage on, and then he did a bedroom extension. My grandpa, which was my mum's father, came down and can be seen on the film putting the bricks on top of the window frame. My mum's got her labourer's hat on and she's busy pointing the bricks on the breeze block, and Bridget and I, of course, with the water. Helping to mix the cement by getting small buckets full of water, which we enjoyed. You know, we felt that we were really sort of taking part in the construction work.
Problems, problems, problems all day long.
The big cities still had problems with old houses. The Glasgow tenements remained, and in the 1960s a new slum clearance scheme was underway. By now, local councils all around the country had decided that the way to solve the housing problem was to build up. The high-rise flat was born. You can still see them in most of our big cities, but the high-rise flats didn't solve the housing problems. In fact, high-rise brought new problems. See if you can pick out some from these clips.
Woe is me, I should have stayed in bed. Can't get the car, my marks ain't been so good. My love life just ain't sweet.
Now that was the Red Road housing development in Glasgow, and they presented a massive wall when you looked at them, of a sort of a people factory, if you like, just people living in wee boxes. And eventually they became very unpopular, these houses. They found dreadful problems with lifts. They didn't work. People were getting stuck to walk upstairs. They felt isolated, stuck in maybe in the 16th floor of one of these blocks. There are lots of areas where the corporations stuck up signs that said no ball games, no this, no that, which was a shame in a way because kids would want to come down and kick a football. Although they had built the houses up to modern standards, there was a river cart running through the site, and I thought, why don't they use such a natural asset as a river cart to make a nice area where people could sit and enjoy almost a country setting? But they hadn't really done enough lot to use the sort of natural facilities that they had.
It wasn't just the houses themselves that changed in the years after the war. Think about what your parents have in their homes today. A fridge and washing machine in the kitchen, central heating, a telephone. In 1945 it was a very different story. A lot of homes didn't have electricity. Bathrooms were rare. People did their washing by hand. And what about furniture? Listen to what Kathleen Phillips says about her house.
Well, we hadn't got any furniture. We borrowed it all from our parents and grandparents because we'd been in married quarters and we hadn't got any furniture at all. It was nice to come into a house like this, you know, with all the mod cons.
What Mrs. Phillips means by mod cons is that for the first time the family had their own bathroom and 3 bedrooms upstairs so that their 2 children could have their own room. These were luxuries the Phillips had never had before.
I suppose the days after the war were still austere. We were recovering from 5 long years. Inside, the decor would be normally dark brown. That seemed always to be the theme, and of course there was tiled fireplaces. Central heating, of course, was unknown, certainly unknown to us. We just had coal fires.
The tiled fireplace that I remember originally in the living room was very tall, and with this sort of traditional motley sort of brown colour that I don't think there was any other colour for a fireplace in those days. The electric fire in the bedroom was a 2-bar affair with separate knobs on it, one each end, and they were both built into the wall when the house was built originally, and they were tiled around. They had a little sort of mantelpiece affair around them. In the footage with Bridget and I playing nurses in the bedroom, there's a radiator in the background. We had central heating put in the late 1960s.
And what about the kitchen? The average kitchen was pretty basic. Cooking was done on a gas cooker. Microwaves, electric toasters, washing machines, dishwashers were all in the future. Hardly anyone had an electric kettle. The sink would be a big stone affair. They were called butler sinks.
The butler sinks were great, actually. They were big, and you could do lots of washing in them by hand with the scrubbing board, of course. On the left-hand side was a draining board that was attached across the back door and taken off when you wanted to go out into the garden. But it was quite a good idea, really, I suppose, because it did sort of expand things a bit.
Washing clothes went through its own revolution. It used to be done with a tub and a mangle, back-breaking work for women, and it was usually done on Mondays.
Then came the twin tub washing machine, not the automatic, but the twin tub. You could fill it with water, then you had to load all this washing in. Then to get it out, you had to either wait until the water got cool, or you had to empty it and then put in the cold water, and then you do this whole process again, and then you had to shove it into the next tub. It was murder.
I think we were quite privileged in a way, but I didn't realise it at the time. I think we had most of what people would now consider to be modern conveniences. I certainly grew up with a black and white television and having a car. We always had 2 holidays a year as well. I think we were probably quite well off.
Judy was quite lucky. Her family had the money to spend on things like cars and televisions. Not everybody was that fortunate. Times were hard after the war for a lot of people. The Pigotts didn't get their television until their son David went to work.
One of the first things I did when I went to work was to buy the family a television, a console model, which came in this big box, which I wrapped up for them and duly presented to them on Christmas Day. And the look on their face as this box appeared and then it was undone, and they realised that they had got a television which we could now watch.
Yeah, I think they quite liked that telly. Of course, televisions were very different then. Until ITV came in 1955, there was only one channel, the BBC, and it was in black and white, not colour. And if you missed your favourite programme, tough. Video recorders hadn't been invented. So looking back, you can see that after 1945, home life changed a lot. Old houses were pulled down and new ones built, and with gadgets and mod-cons inside the home, we became a consumer society. But as the people in the film point out, change didn't affect everyone in the same way.
My parents had their name to have a bigger house in the east end of Glasgow. But we were apprehensive about leaving family and friends and what have you, because it was quite a bit away.
My parents actually left this property in 1980. They moved into a bungalow. The family had grown up and they'd all left home, and now would be a good time to move.
I stayed in the house till 1992 when I got married and moved away and left behind many memories.
Oh, I've seen a big, big difference. I can't believe it's the same place, really. I think I've seen about 3 generations since I've lived here. The young mums, like I was, and then their children got married, and now their children have got married. And they're all that age now, age group, they're just disappearing. But we're not, are we?
In the black and white, there was nothing you could do. So cars to the light on a Saturday.